Welcome back, guys. My name is Chris Patrick, and today we're going to work on a video series on how to work on an engine as well as tuning. So this is going to be a multi-part video, so hopefully you guys enjoy. So stay tuned, stick around, and let's get building. Now that we've got you a little bit closer to the workbench, we're going to go over some things and some parts and pieces that you're going to need to work on your motor of choice. So this particular motor is my Macklin Team Edition version 2, as you see right there. This is my very first motor that I had purchased new, and it is currently being ran in the dirt oval B6 car that I have. I took it out to do some maintenance, so in this particular case it is a 17.5 stock motor. I figured this is the most relevant for you guys that are into the racing scene of RC world. This is going to be pretty much what you run. You know that I am a Trinity fan, so this was before I bought Trinity motors and fell in love with them, so that's why I'm using this. It just happens to be out of the vehicle. Parts and pieces that you're going to need, obviously some form of wrenches to take apart your can for your motor, so I'm going to set that aside. The motor analyzer, the voltometers, and the heat gun is all going to be done on part 2 and part 3 of this video, so for now I'm going to push these out of the way, so that way they're not so forth in the way. The most important thing about video number 1 is we're going to talk about the mechanical parts of tuning your engine. And what I mean by that is going over some of the details, how this motor functions, and go from there. Obviously, your motor is being ran by 3 wires that are soldered on top. Those soldered joints are controlled by your electronic speed controller. Very simple, very easy. Inside of here, you have a sensor board. That sensor board monitors how fast and how much voltage is being ran through this housing through the magnets, and what turns your rotor that is inside here. So that is the very, very basic concept of how a motor functions when it comes to that. The problem is trying to understand every little detail is probably the hardest part about tuning these motors. And I'm going to do my best to explain. So while I'm taking this apart, I am going to give you my disclaimer. I am not responsible for any damage that you do to your motor caused by overclocking, not shimming things correctly. Basically, take this information with a grain of salt. My information may not be the quote-unquote correct way, but this is how I do it, and I want to share it with you guys. So, most motors have a timing indicator right there, and those timing marks will give you an idea roughly on where you need to be. So this motor has a little tiny notch. I don't know if you can see it. I'm trying to get it in the light for you guys, but it's right there. No, that light is just right in the way. But right now it's on about 44 degrees. So I'm taking this whole thing apart to show you how this functions. So that is your sensor board that I was referring to, but to actually get this fully apart, it's actually held on by 3 screws. Every can is designed a little bit differently. So, for example, a Trinity RevTech is a little bit different when it comes to the design of the actual metal housing that holds everything together. But these are aluminum screws. So there you go. So sometimes when you tear apart an engine, be very careful, because a lot of times there's going to be small shims either on the top shaft right here or the bottom shaft down here. So for example, this has a big aluminum shim and one little tiny one that just fell out, which you may not be able to even see, but let's put that, I'll put it on this box so you can see it. So I've got 1, 2, and a bigger shim. So those 3 shims came off of the bottom portion of the rotor. There was nothing on the top. So here's the concept of how this works. The sad part is I can't get this one any farther apart. I'm sure it comes apart. I just don't know how, and I don't want to go that far on tearing it apart. But the Trinity RevTechs are similar, but inside your can, you're going to have 3 eyes. Those 3 eyes are kind of hard to see. I don't think you can see it. If I can get down in here. Down inside there's the sensor board. It's actually on this side of the engine. But there's 3 sets of eyes. Let's just say this is your sensor board. You got an eye here, you got an eye here, and an eye over here. So it's kind of like a triangular shaped. Those 3 sensors register off of the top of your rotor. So in theory, the closer you can get your rotor up against this sensor board, like that, the more consistent you're going to get a reading between the 3. So, have you ever bought for example, I'm going to use my Trinity Boxes. When you buy a better versioned motor than just a basic unit, so for example, this one is my 17.5 RevTech, but this one is a team spec motor. So, the team spec tells me that it's in the top 5% according to their world. So this is ran 17.7, 17.8, and 17.7. Those are the 3 sensors that is registering on that motor. Not this one, but you get the idea. Same thing with my team spec 13.5 RevTech motor that I got. It's a 10.7, 10.7, and 10.7. So you notice all 3 of these numbers are identical. That is what you want. That gives you the best consistency that you can get, is when you get those 3 sensors to read identically the same. That's where the power comes from, and that's why people spend the extra money on the higher end motors, because they come out balanced. They've got the best of the best when it comes to the rotor testing the best. They got the strongest magnets in the cases, just everything about it. They're basically hand-picked parts, and they make the best engines that they can, and that's the difference from a basic, like, entry-level motor versus the $200 motors that you see that are out on the market. Now, you can take just a basic motor and do some tweaking and get it comparable. Not saying you're going to get it identically the same, but you're going to get it close enough that it should save you some money. So we're going to start by putting this back together. I already know that some engines, like I said, they'll have one of these small shims or possibly two on that end. So what you do is you slowly reassemble your motor, and then you check to see if that at all hits anything. So you may have to reassemble your can just to hold things in place, because you kind of need the bearing to hold it. So there you go. So test it. When without shims, really hard to see, but this motor has a ton of in play. That in play is what you don't want. So imagine trying to race and that pinion is just moving up and back and forth. So what happens is as that rotor pulls away from your sensor board, there goes your consistency between those three eyes that's on that sensor board to your rotor. So that's the important part that I'm trying to teach you, is how to eliminate all of this in play that you've got on your motor. So once you've got the idea of how and what you're looking for on adjusting your rotor, you can buy individual rotors, and they are designed accordingly to the manufacturer of what they're looking for. So for example, you may have an ultra torque rotor, so you could replace this rotor with like a ultra torque, a high torque, a medium torque, like medium RPM and a high RPM range. Like Trinity offers 4 or 5 or 6 different rotors depending on the manufacturer and depending on the motor type. I think Macklin has a high torque version and an RPM version. I believe this particular one is an RPM version. It is part number 4143. This motor here is kind of equivalent to like your Ready motors, or Reedy motors, I should say. Sorry. Where your they tend to be more of the RPM side of the range, and then your Trinity motors tend to be more of the torquey end of the range. So it just comes down to driving preference and what type of it's just more of a preference on what you prefer when it comes to how you drive and the application on what that motor is being used for. So that gives you an idea of crash course on your rotors. So let's go ahead and put this back together really quick with the 3 shims that I've got over here. Like I said, I got the 2 small ones and 1 big one, and I did not have one on the top side. And let's see what happens. So it is magnetized, so you're going to fight with that, getting it in and out. It happens. This motor, unfortunately, is pretty dirty, which is why I took it out of the vehicle, and I was going to do some maintenance on it. And I decided I was going to do a video instead. So this is how this motor was built from the factory. I don't believe I did anything to this motor yet. So there we go. Fully assembled, obviously without the end cap, which is just to hold the rotor from, or sorry, the sensor board from twisting. I don't have any screw holes or the screws in it yet, but you're gonna notice you get a little bit of in play, and you can see it right there. So that in play, that's close. I would like to get that a little tighter if possible. So this is where having extra parts comes into play. So sometimes you can buy individual pieces and parts, and motor shims is one of them. These are stainless, or those are steel bolts Those are aluminum. So I have upgraded this particular motor from the steel to the aluminum. And yes, that actually did make about a 5% increase in the RPM range. So what I'm hunting for is 1 or 2. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull 2 out. I don't think it's going to take 2. I think it's going to take 1. But we're going to start with 2 out of the box. So we're going to tear this back apart. And I want to add 1 more shim. I'm going to put it on this end. I already know that the rotor's not hitting the sensor board, and I can't get it any closer to the sensor board because I have no shims on that end. So all of the play is coming from this end of the motor, which is what I'm trying to eliminate. You want it as tight as you can get it without causing any kind of drag or resistance. So put it back together, hold the can tight, check that end play. Right now, it's tight. I can tell you right now, that's too tight. So, from my experience. So I need to take that one back out. And some of these are different thicknesses. I know it's hard to see, but I'm going to take one of these little guys out. Come on. Maybe. Can't get it to come out. It's stuck. So I pull it apart. It just stuck back up there. I know you guys can't see it, but I'm trying to get these little shims out. That's one. There's no easy way of doing this. This just takes patience and time. So, like I was saying, you're going to notice this one is a lot thinner than those brass ones are. So, I'm going to put this back in here. And I'm going to put a big spacer in. Put the big spacer in first, and I'm going to put one brass in this time. There we go. Put this back together, and then we'll check that in play again. I can feel it. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, you can, right there. Just the slightest of in play. That to me is a lot tighter using one brass than it is using these two little ones. But we're not done here. So now what we're going to do is take this apart. Want that brass one stuck on the end bell. And then we're going to take one of these really small ones, and we're going to add that on there. Like I said, I am trying to get this rotor as pushed as far as I can get it against this sensor board without actually rubbing, and I'm trying to eliminate in play. So let's check it now. Like that is tight. Yep, that's just a tick too tight for me, so take it apart. And that little one is going to be right here. There we go. So I'm happy with the one big spacer and the one brass washer. There was 2 metal washers in there, not the brass, but you've seen how much play was in it. So let's go ahead, put this back together. I don't remember where the screw holes are. Screw holes are there. So keep in mind of the design of the motor, anything that's metal interferes with your magnets. This is aluminum. Aluminum is not magnetized, so it will not stick to this magnet that runs around the field that actually spins your motor around. This is why people put in aluminum screws in their motors. The aluminum screws actually freeze up just a little bit of magnet on your motor. And it does actually show on the dyno RPM increase by replacing those 3 screws with aluminum screws. You just have to take my word for it. I've done it. May do that in a video 4 of the difference between a motor with the aluminum screws versus metal, but trust me, it does increase the difference. It's a minimal percentage, but again, when you are running a spec class and you are trying to get every ounce of power and energy that you can out of your motor, the $10 investment, buying a cheaper motor and doing the tuning, replacing all of these screws and everything else that you can do is still going to be cheaper than buying the $200 version of the same motor that has the best of the best, if you are confident in tuning your motors. That's what it comes down to. So we've got the end bell back on. 3 screws are tight, so we want to check our end play again. Yeah, that's a little tight. I have absolutely no play. So we're gonna go back to the two silver screws the way I had it. And this is why you check. Because the last thing you want to do is have your motor so locked up, you throw this thing in your vehicle and you go to take off and you just fry it. Like, you instantly crush everything basically in your motor, and there goes your ego and everything along with it. So just because I was holding the can doesn't necessarily mean I had enough pressure on it. And I believe this motor came with just these 3 shims, and one of those shims was on this side of the motor and one shim was on this side with the big spacer, if I remember correctly. But again, that's been so long ago. There we go. There you go, guys. So let's get this back together real quick. And then while I'm screwing this in, we're going to talk about oils. There are plenty of oils out on the market that you can choose from to lube up the bearings. There are a set of bearings on this end, and there is a set of bearings on this end of the motor. those do need some lubrication. I don't care what other people tell you. It is a friction point metal on metal. So if you run this without any kind of lubrication, eventually those bearings will go bad on you. So what oil do you recommend? I'm going to tell you what I run and why. And I'll let you make the educated decision on if you want to spend $10 on a little tiny tube of oil that is quote-unquote designed for an engine that operates at, we'll say, 125 degrees. I'm sure the bearings get a little bit warmer than that. But I use a firearm lubricant called Rem Oil, made by Remington. And that is this. You can get this at your local Walmart for about $4, and this ginormous tube will last you probably a lifetime. I went on Amazon and bought these little applicator containers and poured some in it, and it's got the little tiny metal tip on the end, which makes it fantastic to use. So here's the reason why I use it. It is super thin. I just put a dot right there. That oil. So you can see it running down the plastic. You want a very thin, light oil to protect these bearings. You don't want something really thick and gooey down in your bearings, because what will happen when dirt or something gets in there, all you're doing is adding resistance by using a thicker oil. All you want is just a small dab right there and a small dab right there. That's all you got to do. Spin it around a few times, check to make sure it still spins nice and free. Now that you put your spacers back in, check your in-play again. Perfect. Don't have any in-play. So, I use the Remington Oil because it's cheap, but it's also designed for firearms, and it says it is rated up to 165 degrees right on the box. So, a firearm, you have to understand it's using gunpowders to ignite and go bang on a gun. And you can imagine the amount of force and heat that comes along with it. If you've never shot a firearm, just trust me, it is volatile when it comes to how they actually function, comparably speaking to this. So we're going to set the timing on this motor to 30 degrees on the can, and we're going to reassemble this. And that is how you physically take apart, shim, and tune your engine to get the most out of it. Like I said, this is a multi-part video. This is just video number 1. This is the basic concept of understanding how a motor works and how to properly adjust your in-play on the ends of your motor to get the most out of it. So stay tuned, guys. Don't forget to check out video number 2 and number 3. And I may end up making a 4th video. I don't know how long I'm going to go with this video series, but that is video 1. And with that, we're going to wrap this video up. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you have a wonderful and fantastic day. And don't forget to hit like, comment, and subscribe. On a personal note, my wife unfortunately has been tested positive for COVID-19, so we are doing okay, and I am currently in self-quarantined, which is why I'm doing some of these videos. So my 2 kids are doing okay, I'm doing okay, and she is doing the best that she can. She's able to breathe pretty well. So yeah, we're all doing pretty good. So thank the Lord for looking over us and keeping everybody safe. And if anybody else has it, I feel deeply sorry for you guys, because it is one of those things where we take mask wearing seriously. I know I have met a few of you, and you all know how I am with it. So anywho, I'm rambling. I'll let you guys go. Have a good one, guys. Later.